Good. So we're gonna start now as people start trickling in. There was a lot of enthusiasm about this particular webinar, how to create a dedicated time and space for yourself in this time of crisis, really, when we are having to isolate ourselves and we are having to run meetings virtually and pretty much do all of our work virtually. And you know, it's not just about work as I see it, but it's also about being isolated from our friends, our loved ones, and having to kind of live this way. So my intention with this webinar is to give you insights and practical tips on how to create a dedicated time and space, not just for work colleagues and not just for work meetings, but really for anyone that you might be meeting online and virtually, whether that's a family member or a loved one or a colleague of yours. So these are the times that we live in. At Narrative, we specialize in listening and storytelling. We have a particular methodology of listening and storytelling that started back in the mid-1990s. And you can learn a lot more about that on our website at www.narativ.com, spelled N-A-R-A-T-I-V, as you see on your screen. And today, really what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking parts of this methodology and specifically apply them to meetings online and connecting virtually. And this idea of creating a dedicated time and space, which is really linked to listening. So if you think of, you know, this big adjustment that we've had to do, you know, where we were used to meeting people in person and used to going into a particular room, perhaps in our office, and that's the conference room, that's the meeting room, that's where everything is set up for meetings. So we just walk into that room, put our notebooks down, and then we greet each other and we start the meeting. And so we kind of take for granted what's already in that room. And probably also what we take for granted is that there's a particular time someone sent out an agenda with a time for that meeting and someone is leading that meeting. And so it's from 11:30 to 12, like we're doing right now. And that's how the meeting's going to go. So all we have to do is just sit down and bring our full attention to the various speakers in the room. But we don't really have to think about the space that we're in. Whereas now we've moved from those physical spaces that are dedicated for meetings to a space that we're often sharing with other people. I have my pregnant wife and son, my toddler, you know, who's almost 4 years old, in the next door room, and I'm in a studio right now, which is actually my wife's studio, which we've converted into my home office because I didn't have a home office before all this started. And I'm sure that every one of you on this webinar have had to make these kinds of adjustments. And so we've gone from having these dedicated places to do meetings to now having to figure out, how do I create this in my own space while I'm negotiating space and time with the other people that might be living in that space, right? So what I want to be doing here is really focus your attention on listening, because besides the fact that we've changed physical spaces, really, in terms of running a meeting, the same principles apply. So what you want to be doing in an online virtual meeting is creating that same space that you have at work. How can you do that when you are leading a meeting online? And again, whether it's with your loved ones or whether it's with your colleagues. So we're going to be talking about listening quite a bit. And I want to talk to you really briefly about this principle of listening and how we see it at Narrative. You know, many of you may know us as a storytelling company, right? A company that focuses on training people on how to find, craft, and tell their story and present their stories. And I can see from the list of attendees that many of you know us through that lens. But really, there's another aspect, which is listening. There can't be any storytelling without listening. And so we always start with listening at Narrative, regardless of what we're doing. But in particular, in the context of a meeting, you first have to work on the listening. And so what we say is that listening is like a cup, it's like a bowl, and as you can see on this slide. And then the speaking, the telling, is like the liquid that gets poured into that bowl. And so the liquid is going to take the shape of that bowl or cup. And so that means that our listening is shaping the speaking, right? So that speaking that's going into the bowl, it's being shaped by how we're listening here. So it begins with listening, and you really have to pay attention to listening and how are you listening? And what are the things that might be getting in the way of your ability to listen, particularly when we are dealing with an online space, and particularly when you're dealing with a much more personal space than an office space. What can you do to minimize the distractions, the obstacles that might be getting in the way of your ability to listen? What can you do to maximize the size of that bowl for your attendees, right? What are the things we can do there? So perhaps you want to think about the space in those terms. What currently behind me right now might be really distracting to my attendees who really and might be getting in the way of their ability to listen? What might be getting in the way in your space right now at this moment? Some sounds, some noises, things that are happening next door, things that are happening in the street, whatever that might be. So that's the first thing. And we'll do a little experiential exercise around that, very, very short. The second principle I just want to talk about here, building on this idea of listening shapes telling, is that it's reciprocal. So just like listening shapes telling, telling shapes listening. We're doing a webinar, so at this moment I can't hear you because that's not the way it's set up, right? And I can't see you, again, because that's not the way it's set up. However, we can be chatting through this chat box, right? And so, of course, I'm not experiencing necessarily that reciprocal relationship right now, because what I'm doing is I'm speaking and I'm seeing a list of attendees, and I'm trusting that this is engaging because the list of attendees seems to be growing rather than being reduced. So people aren't leaving, in other words. That would indicate something to me if people started to leave in droves. That might do something to the way that I'm speaking, right? So again, and the way that I'm speaking may be shaping your it is shaping your listening right now. There may be things that I'm saying that are engaging you in a certain way that you weren't engaged before, right? So these are the kinds of things that we really want you to pay attention to when you are setting up some way of meeting online, especially if you're able to see people and if you're able to hear people, right? So those two principles, that listening shapes telling, and listening is like a bowl, and the liquid that gets poured into that bowl is like the speaking, right? So your listening is actively shaping how someone else is speaking. Very, very important to remember that. And so, especially when we're meeting online, I have a workshop next week that you're all invited to, by the way, another free offering that we're doing in this time of crisis. And for online workshops, what we do is we actually see everybody, right? And we can see and hear everybody. And so we can see these icons, just like you're seeing me right now on your screen. And that could be very distracting, right? And so we kind of have to adjust our listening to that. But what's even more distracting is if there's lots of things going on within your icon, if there's people walking around behind you, if there's things being moved, if, whatever the case might be. So just really thinking about those kinds of distractions. And then of course that speaking shapes telling as well, that there's this kind of reciprocal relationship between the two. So I want to do a really quick thing now that I think everyone has come online and is with us, and the list of attendees seems to be stabilizing. So in other words, it's not going up anymore. And what I'd like to do now is I would just like for you to bring your attention to the space that you're in and just kind of take a look around and see, and I'm doing this at the same time as you are, and just see what's in your space, right? Just what do you notice in your space that maybe you haven't noticed before? And especially take a look at your screen and what we might be seeing of your space. If we could see you, if I could see you right now, what would I see in your space, right? So I'm looking around and I'm seeing, oh yeah, there's our book, Powered by Storytelling, right? By Murray Nossel, which is the founder of Narrative. So that's something I thought about putting here 2 weeks ago when I had to start working from home, right? Actually, it's been 3 weeks. And And then I notice other things. There's a book up there that says paper cutting. My wife is an artist. That's one of her specialties, one of her mediums. She's a paper cutting artist. There's an art piece right behind us. It's not from my wife, but it's a very good friend of ours. There's another art piece over here, which is actually an art piece of my wife. So that's paper cutting. You can see that. And then on the side here, there's a door, and pointing this way, there's a door over here, and that leads to our kitchen and living room where my son and wife are right now, and she's desperately trying to entertain him. And then on my left over here is a balcony where I can see the outside world, and it's starting to be a little bit of a sunny day, right, over here in New York City, epicenter, as we call it. And of course, now that I've just said that, there's the whole outside world, and I'm aware of that now, right? I'm aware of the news cycle and all these things, and now the mind chatter starts to, kind of begins. But for now, just focus on this space. What do you notice? And what in this space of yours is particularly yours, is something that reflects who you are? If you don't have that, I really encourage you to find something in your house, in your apartment, wherever you are now, and don't do it now, of course, but find something that really represents who you are, that's meaningful to you. And in your next meeting, put that object somewhere that you can see it, right? So whether you can see it from your screen, when you see yourself on your screen, I did that with this book, right? That's meaningful to me. There's also a lei that's very meaningful to me, because that was a trip, a family trip to Hawaii with my parents. And that was a very meaningful time. So that's what that is right there under those books. And that's something that's mine, right? It's something that represents me in this space that really isn't usually mine, right? It's usually my wife's space. So that's one thing. Find something of yours that's really meaningful to you. Bring it to the space in which you're going to have these online and virtual meetings. And make it part of what other people can see or not. That's really up to you to decide, but just have something there, because that'll be a reminder that this indeed is your space, right? It's not somebody else's space. It's your space for the duration that you have with the people that you're going to be working with online. So the next thing I'd like you to do is to just get comfortable in your seats, and just for a moment, close your eyes and take a breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And now I'd like you to pay attention to the sounds in the room that you're in and see what you notice. What do you notice when you pay attention to the sounds in the room that you're in? And how far can you take your listening outside of the room that you're in? Whether it's in the actual outside world, in the streets, wherever you might be, wherever your house or apartment might be located, kind of neighborhood that you're located in. How far can you take your listening? What do you hear when you take it as far as you possibly could? Even if it's just to the next door room, that's the farthest you can take your listening. What do you hear? What do you notice when you do that? And stay with that for a moment. And now bring yourselves back to the room that you're in. Bring your listening back to the room you're in. And once again, pay attention to the sounds. What do you notice now? Anything that you hadn't noticed before that's now there? And now, with your eyes still closed, visualize that same space that you looked at just a moment ago that I asked you to look around. in. What strikes you about this space? What is something that really emerges when you visualize this space? Perhaps something new emerges, perhaps something you want to add to the space, perhaps you want to take something out of the space. Just visualize that space. And now notice your body in this space. You're sitting in your space. Your body is sitting in your space. And just do a quick body scan from head to toe, noticing the areas of tension, the areas that are relaxed, and areas that maybe you hadn't even noticed. Just go down from the head to the throat, the chest area, back. I'll let you do this scan on your own. Again, noticing areas of tension, not trying to fix anything, just keep breathing. Nothing right or wrong here. It's just your body doing what it's doing. Keep scanning all the way down your legs to your feet. Take a breath now, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And bring yourself back again. Maybe wiggle your toes. Maybe move your fingers, your hands, and open your eyes when you're ready. Okay, and take another breath like I just did. All right, so now we've created another level of presence. We've looked at this space. We've thought a little bit about perhaps a single object. Maybe during this moment, this exercise, you may have thought of other things you could do with this space. We've now paid attention to the body. We've paid attention a lot to our listening. And what I'd like to draw your attention to now are what we call obstacles to listening. So as you were doing this exercise, you may have noticed that there were things that got in the way of your ability to listen, right? That as we were scanning our bodies, as we were looking at the spaces, as we were thinking about, people in this space, whatever it might be that emerged, I'd love for you to think about that for a minute, what you noticed while we were doing this exercise here. And chat in the box what you noticed kind of either got in the way, or just anything you noticed actually. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this idea of obstacles. Actually, I'll start talking about obstacles as you guys use the chat. So this would be a great time. If you haven't noticed, there is a chat box where you are able to talk with everyone else, and I can see that, and everyone else can see that too. So I'd love for all of you to start to share in the chat box what you noticed during this exercise. Oh, great. So I'm seeing sound of a dishwasher, neighbors talking outside loudly, sharing the space with others, my sense of desire to be outside. So a lot actually having to do now with our first category of obstacles to listening, right? What I'm trying to do here is to make you aware of what your obstacles to listening are. Because ultimately, you are responsible for your listening, right? I'm not responsible for your listening. I can't control your listening, right? Whereas you actually can actively try to shape your own listening so that it doesn't get in the way of my ability to speak, right? So let's see. So we've got a few obstacles to listening here. Sounds, notification sounds, the baby cooing, right? So a lot of sounds, a lot of external things are going on. So that's the first category of obstacles that you see here on your screen. I wonder if there are any physical obstacles that we're seeing. Yes, my jaw kept clenching every few seconds after I had just unclinched it, right? So that's a physical, physiological obstacle that's going on, right? Could be really distracting, could really be getting in the way. So that's a great example. Thank you for that. Other physical obstacles might be that you're thirsty, that you're hungry. You know, we're getting on the Eastern time here, we're getting close to lunch, so maybe that's going on for some people, could be getting in the way. Internal obstacles, now this is the mind chatter. This is stuff that's going on inside of our heads. Now I'm curious if I can find anyone, for those who have not, oh, my sense of desire to be outside, right? So there's a difference between just, you know, looking outside and then now I have a desire to be outside, right? So that's an internal thing that's going on, the desire to be out there. Pain, someone says pain on the right side, so annoying with sitting all day. Stand up, stretch, you know, those are the guys, that's just my wanting to fix things. Of course, you can see what my obstacles to listening are, just naturally. But yes, absolutely, you know, I have back pain and, you know, being in a cramped space, that kind of thing, very difficult. Another one, trying to calm the anxiety. Yes, fear, anxiety. You know, these are part of those internal obstacles, those psychological obstacles. Very, very difficult to listen when we're experiencing, you know, high anxiety. And so we're trying to calm it, right? So what are some of the strategies that we can use to try to calm it? Meaning making, now this is stuff that's around interpretations and judgments, right? Now, when we do an exercise on our own, maybe we don't have that many, although I would venture to say we probably do. You know, judgments, opinions, interpretations. What's this exercise about? What does he want us to do? You know, that kind of thing. I don't know if anybody had that experience. If you did, you can certainly put it in the chat box. And then finally, relational obstacles. These are the things that happen between people, right? And so especially when we think about meeting online, you know, our relationships with other people, now we can see them, we can hear them, but we're not physically with them. So that might be getting in the way of our ability to really listen to them in a really full way. So what I'm trying to point out here is that it takes something to listen to someone else in any normal circumstance, everyday circumstance. It takes something because there's many obstacles. Point I'm making here is that you really want to be aware of what those obstacles are, because when you're meeting online, there are even more obstacles. Now, you don't have the comfort of being in front of someone, of having that sort of chemistry that's going on between two people. You know, there's many studies that show that the reason that in-person meetings might be more efficient than online meetings is because there's something happening chemically when we're in the same room together, that doesn't happen when we're online. So how do we adapt to this? So I think being really aware of those obstacles to listening, and that before you start a meeting, bring your awareness to this. Take a moment like we just did to just bring your awareness to the space. What do you want to bring into your space? What are the obstacles that are currently in your way? What can you do to alleviate those obstacles? And if you can't do anything about some of those obstacles, speak them to the other people on the call, right? So that they get where you're coming from. If you have pain and you need to get up, if I was looking at you online and I saw someone get up out of their chair and walking around, I'd be like, well, I guess they're just not interested in what I have to say. But if you told me I have pain in my side, I need to get up, okay, now I get it. It's got nothing to do with me as a speaker. And you can see what that does to the relationship, right? So be as open as possible to that. And Michael actually says exactly. Great. So you know, thank you for all these comments. That's really great. In the last few minutes that we have here, what I want to do is kind of go through this this checklist here, and we're going to be sharing that checklist with you, either after this call or during this call. We'll see what we can do about that. What I wanted to do really quickly here is what we've looked at today is really this first point, preparing the listening environment, right? This is what this is all about. The listening environment comprises the space. It comprises the amount of time. How long is this meeting going to be? If you're the one leading the meeting, let people know how long the meeting is going to be, where you're going to start, where you're going to end, right? That creates a great sense of structure and comfort, just like you would if you were walking into that conference room and it said on the conference room, reserved from 11:30 to 12. you now have to say that to people. You have to put that into your emails. You have to make it part of your calendar invitation. And also you have to really be very precise, and you'll see this in our detailed checklist that we're going to send you. You have to be very precise about how to connect and what to do in case there's a breakdown in that connection, right? And be precise about your agenda as well. Setting up your computer or your space, we talked quite a bit about that, right? So we'll send you a detailed checklist that goes a little bit further into that, of the things to pay attention to. Your computer especially. Your computer is a space. We haven't really talked about that yet. And what I can see on my computer is my PowerPoint slide, the chat box, the attendee list, and myself, right? Other meetings, you might be able to see or hear everybody. So pay attention to the things that might distract you. What are the obstacles to listening that come from your computer? Somebody said, actually, the notifications, right? Turn those off. There's an option on my Mac to turn off. It's on the top right-hand side of my computer. For anybody who doesn't know that, I just discovered it because of this whole thing. And now I can turn off the notifications so they don't actually happen and they don't disturb me while I'm in a meeting. And I can do that just for the 25, 30 minutes that I'm on a call, right? So whatever you can do, minimize all those other windows apart from the one that you need for your meeting, because otherwise that's going to get in the way too. Setting up your space, we talked quite a bit about that. I love the idea, especially of bringing in an object that you could be, that's dear to you, that represents who you are, and either show that to the people that are going to be there somewhere in your space. Don't have to make it super obvious, or you don't show it to them and it's in front of you and it's something that you can come back to because it represents that this is your space and you're just as comfortable here as anywhere else. And finally, get what you need get what you need for this webinar, for the meeting, for the duration of the meeting. Do you need food? Do you need a drink? What do you need for this meeting? Do you need a notebook? I love bringing notebooks into a physical meeting. And so I do this online as well. I've got my notebook right next to me with my notes here. And I do that because otherwise I'll be typing on my computer and that might be distracting to whoever's speaking, right? So, and it's probably going to be distracting to me as well. And it's going to be a temptation to go and look at emails and things like that if I start interacting with my computer. So I would say whatever you do in a physical space, try to replicate that, even if you're on your laptop, right, or on your desktop. So these are some of the insights that we have. We're going to follow up with materials for you. We're going to follow up with a detailed checklist that you will get as a PDF. You'll also get a detailed PDF about coaching that I've now started to do virtually and online. I do coaching around listening, things that exactly what we've done today. You've had a little bit of an experience of that, but I also do coaching around storytelling and how to craft stories, especially in a time where we're trying to connect with others. And I see that Sasha, my colleague here, is sharing now with you documents that I'm referring to. So you'll get a document about creating a dedicated time and space and that checklist. Use it for your next meeting. Let me know how it goes in your next meeting with that. And contact me. You can send me an email at jerome@narrative.com. I'd love to know how your next meeting goes when you use these techniques. I would also love to work with you and anybody who needs it. We're offering actually our first session of coaching for free in these times, so that it makes it possible for everyone to take advantage of the services that we offer, especially online in a virtual way. I want to thank, I think it's exactly 12 p.m. Eastern time, it's 12:01. I want to thank everyone for being on this webinar. It's really so great to feel connected to a community like this. You'll be hearing from us. You'll be getting emails from us as a follow-up. Please tell other people about Narrative and what you've learned here. And yeah, do put it in place and see how that works. All right, guys. Thank you so much again for attending. And I will see you soon, hopefully. Thank you. Thank you.